Hi everyone, we're going to be looking at Act 2 during this lesson. This is a double lesson, so it should take you 2 lessons to complete this work. Our essential question is, how does blind ambition lead to Macbeth's downfall? And our learning objective is to explore the pivotal parts of Act 2. Some vocabulary here you might not recognize would be the word or the phrase blind ambition, which means if you are ambitious or you really want something, and how sometimes when you really want something, you forget about everything else that's happening and you focus on one thing. Blind ambition. Downfall, which is what we've had a few times, but we'll remind you again what it is basically how you end up failing or you're getting worse at something. And finally, the word pivotal means important. So Act 2. Act 2 is an extremely important act in Macbeth. So your first task is going to be for you to make notes in your interactive notebook. As you can see in the image to the left of the screen there, you see a man with a dagger in his hand coming in through the curtains. And another man who is, in this image, King Duncan, asleep in his bed. So Act 2, Scene 1 and 2, and Act 2, Scene 3 and 4. I have listed some basic points for you to write down into your interactive notebook. I know it seems like there is quite a bit of writing here, but that is all you will be doing for Act 2. For the rest, we will be analyzing the different aspects of it rather than making notes. So in Act 2, Scene 1 and 2, Banquo, who is Macbeth's really good friend, enters and questions himself about the dream of listening to the witches. So he is still thinking about what the witches said. It drew the attention to Macbeth about Banquo on his way of killing Duncan. When he's about to kill Duncan, he sees a flying dagger in the sky and he can't seem to grab it. So this here is when Macbeth starts to kind of hallucinate and he is on his way to committing the terrible deed, killing the king, also known as regicide. It convinced him to kill Duncan as he believed in the vision. So when he sees the dagger floating in front of him, this convinced him to go and carry out the terrible deed. He believed in the vision. He's starting to really believe in the supernatural because the witches predicted all of these things that have happened. Macbeth returns with the dagger to his room. Here, Lady Macbeth gets angry because he did not leave the dagger as she requested. So after he murders Duncan, he takes the dagger back with him to his room, and Lady Macbeth is extremely angry. She wanted to leave the dagger in the room along with the murdered body of King Duncan. Macbeth begins crying, or he began crying about his murder of Duncan and how he cannot be forgiven. So here we see that ultimately Macbeth has a conscience. Macbeth was a good person, but now his ambition is starting to get in his way. He wants to be king so badly he's willing to be disloyal to the king and murder him. Lady Macbeth returns after taking the dagger back and confronts him. Okay, so she brings the dagger back to the chambers where King Duncan is asleep and murdered. So she comes back and she confronts Macbeth and tells him that a little water can wash away the blood, as Macbeth is upset about the blood. So that is what happens in Act 2, Scene 1 and 2. Scene 3 and 4, then, you have a porter comes drunk to greet Macduff and Lennox, telling them that he is drunk. Macbeth comes in and greets them and tells them that Duncan is asleep. Now we know that this is a lie because Macbeth has just committed murder. Macduff discovers that the king has been killed and the castle becomes chaotic at once. We remember the word chaos from the start of the play, where the weather represented the chaos that the women were, or the witches were about to cause within the kingdom. Once Macduff discovers the king, the chaos starts to unravel. All of the nobles and the servants come rushing to the scene at once Macduff has discovered the dead body. Macbeth, in front of them, declares his anger that he has killed the chamberlains. So at this point, Macbeth pretends, I guess, that he is extremely angry that someone has committed this murder, which is quite strange because we know that Macbeth has committed the murder, and he murders the chamberlains. He murders the people that they had framed for King Duncan's murder. We are not sure at this stage if Macbeth is actually losing his mind or if he is worried that the chamberlains might give away Macbeth's position in the murder, even though that they had drugged and framed those chamberlains at that time. To escape any more suspicion, Lady Macbeth pretends to faint, and Macbeth left her with her. Okay, so she tries to cause a distraction because she realizes that Macbeth is going a little bit crazy, so she faints, and Macbeth has to leave the room with her. Later in court, Malcolm and Donalbain, both sons of King Duncan, quickly flee to save their own lives. So they run away. They've run away from the kingdom to save their own lives. Which means, as we know, Malcolm was meant to be the heir to the throne, that none of these gentlemen are actually going to take over the position of king because they are afraid of their own lives and afraid of being murdered. Later, the play reflects on Ross taking on with an old noble on the events. Okay, so later you'll see um, some information about the character of Ross and nobility. And finally, then you have Macduff later enters in to tell them that Macbeth is now king. And it's at this stage in the final scene of Act 2 that Macbeth becomes the king. Here is where things are going to continue to unravel and unfold, and chaos continues to ravage through the kingdom in Inverness and in Scotland. Okay, so that's the key information about Act 2, scenes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And basically, the most important thing is to know is that in Act 2, Macbeth murders the king. We start to see the chaos unravel a little more clearly. We start to question if Macbeth is starting to go insane. And we note that some of the people in the kingdom, such as Banquo and a number of other people, are starting to become a little bit suspicious. If you're still not sure about the summary of that information, here is a storyboard that illustrates the basic details about Act 2. So as you can see from the pictures, this is what happens. Again, in scene 2, you see Lady Macbeth once again pushing Macbeth to go and do something. And we note that his ambition is probably the most obvious thing in terms of what makes him want to be king the most. So task 2, once you are finished with that note taking, is you're going to do what we did last week in terms of putting our quotations in the graphic organizer. Instead of doing it day by day, you are going to watch this video, and as the video continues, pause it when it illustrates the quotation and write it into your graphic organizer. Make sure that you label the diagram, so in the center, here you'll put Act 2, and then when you're putting in your quotations, so there's only 4 this time, but there might be maybe 2 quotations for scene 2. So as you're going through it, you will put in Act 2, Scene 1, and your quotation, Scene 2, and your quotation, Scene 2, because there's 2, Scene 3, Scene 4, and that's it. Okay, there's only 4. So that is what you will do for your second task. Okay. Again, you have 2 days or 2 lessons to complete this work. So you should probably aim to get task 1 done on your first day and then task 2 on your second day, and it will help refresh your memory in terms of the details of